Welcome everybody to our Boris Effects webinar. And as Heather mentioned, what we're going to have a look at today, I'm just going to hit play on this screen, and hopefully that'll play back in real time for you guys. But what we're going to look at today is an overview of what we showed at NAB 2012 for those of you who were unable to visit the booth or the show this year. Just suffice to say, it was a very successful event. Great show. Attendance was up. Really some fabulous stuff there. And some of that fabulous stuff were some of the new products that we were showing, including Boris Continuum Complete 8. Continuum Complete 8 is our latest offering in the Continuum line of filter effects, and is currently available in not only the Adobe After Effects host, which is what we're going to take a look at first, but also the Avid Media Composer host environment, which is what Dirk is going to show us when I pass over onto him in about 20 minutes or so. But it's also available in hosts such as Sony Vegas and others. But we're going to focus on today, during this webinar event, just these two hosts, Adobe After Effects and Avid Media Composer 6. For After Effects, what we're going to look at are some of the new filters and the new features. So I'd like to just start off by explaining some of what you're seeing on screen right now. So this is a little promo piece that actually Dirk put together for us prior to the show. And as you can see, it's a stock video clip by Digital Juice, and we've used the same clip throughout this little demo piece just to keep the focus on the effects that you're seeing, so that you're not distracted too much by changing video clips. So there you just saw this particle effect, the new particle 3D emitter, which is used to create that little text wipe on and off, and then you're seeing a bunch of different filters applied to this one particular clip. You know, you've got some LED right there. This is a very nice effect, and a prism glow. We're using the new film glow, and there's some caustics, very nice use of the BCC caustics filter. And some auto-generated stars in the background of that one, and then we've got some time effects just mulling through there. And that's a use of the pin arc that we just saw over that particular piece, and we've got some nice glints and more glows and more optical flow being used there to retime that particular clip. And that's, what you're seeing right there is the wildcards filter, which is really cool. And again, just rolls back into the particles. So there you go. There's a little intro to the BCC package. And this is what we were showing at NAB on the monitors when anybody walked up. So I wanted to give everybody else here the benefit of seeing that too, because I think it's a fabulous little movie, and it's a great way to get a look at what some of the new filters and effects inside of Continuum Complete are. And I'm pushing this around to the side just so that you can see. This is actually, it's a 3D experience inside of After Effects, as we know, and using the BCC filters is also a 3D experience because we've got a much deeper level of integration into Adobe product line with the new version 8. So let's have a look at some of that. I'm just going to go now and bring up my Adobe After Effects project, and I'm going to hit the preview around button here, and I'm going to have a look at this little particle effect. Isn't that cool? That's a particle emitter 3D, which has been applied to a title. Now, again, this is another piece that Dirk had made while he was working on the particle emitter 3D filter. And he's going to get a lot deeper into the particle filters when he shows this inside of the Avid Media Composer product. But I thought I'd give you a little glimpse of that here, because it's a really powerful and very cool filter and very easy to use. And while I say it's easy to use, it has a comprehensive parameter list. If I simply just twirl this down, give you a preview of it, there's the particle emitter 3D, and you can see there's a bunch of different parameters. There are tons of parameters to really customize the look that you're going after and produce some very cool and full-on 3D particle scenes. So there's the particle emitter. So I'm going to just scroll back to the beginning of my project here and start going down and introducing to you some of the new filters that we've introduced to Continuum Complete and we're showing at NAB this past year. So, how about this one? This is a filter called BCC Stage Light. And, oh, you know, I almost forgot. Before I just jump into going down through this filter, one thing that I wanted to mention, which was for those of you who are new to the product, what is Continuum Complete? Well, Continuum Complete is a set of over 200 host UI native filters and transitions to enable the generation of VFX in your host of choice. And what is new with Continuum Complete 8? We've got better particles, we've got better lens flares, better glow, better lights, better AE integration, better image restoration tools. And notice I've said it better a lot there. That's because these are not new things to the product. We've always been about particles and lens flares and glows and lights and integration into hosts like AE and image restoration tools. But we've improved upon that, taking user feedback, and they say, well, you've got great particles, but what about something else? And we've looked at new ways to create particles, and we've gotten improved that to make the user experience a lot better, enable you to create visual effects which would be impossible to do without these tools. So let's go back in now and have a look at the comp that I have. Here it is, and I've got BCC Stage Light applied to this solid. And what is that giving us? Well, there's the original clip, and you can see this is just a stock clip, and it looks kind of bland. I've got this nice little bit of volumetric lighting coming out from the light that was put in behind this musician. And in the scene, I've also got a couple of AE lights, and of course they're doing nothing because I'm in a 2D environment. Nothing has been turned to 3D here. And I've got a camera here, an AE scene camera. And then we've got this red solid, which is currently disabled. Now when I enable the solid, all of a sudden we're getting this very cool looking scene, and it looks a lot different than it did before. And that's because I've applied the stage light filter to the solid. There it is. And the stage light filter is making use of the AE lights that are in this particular scene. So even though the filter is applied to a 2D layer, and we're looking at a 2D live action layer here, nothing is 3D, I'm able to use the 3D lights inside of After Effects to generate this cool looking result. And so we've got these lights on, I've got smoke on, I can turn this smoke off so we can get that dry ice effect that we often see at concerts and shows. And you can see now how I've added to the scene by just dropping in this one particular little filter, stage light. What else can stage light do? Well, let's click on the next comp. And as I drag down through the timeline here, I'll just click in the background so we don't see those on-screen UI points. If I just drag through the timeline here, what we're going to see is this scene, which is fairly cool. We've got a moon coming into view, and it has a reflection on the lake and a little bit of fog in there. So this is synthetic. That moonlight doesn't exist except in the realm of this comp that we've created. And so I've used the stage light to actually add some interesting elements into an otherwise kind of flat scene. There's stage light, we'll just turn that on and off again. There it is disabled, there it is enabled. And the only work that I did, aside from lining up these lights, was to, as you can see, adjust the master intensity. So I went from just 0 up to 100 on the intensity, so it appears as though the moon is getting brighter as the natural light in the scene disappears. And one other thing to note here is that in the first comp that I showed you, I used the AE lights, the After Effects 3D lights, to drive the additional lighting that I'm adding to the scene. In this particular filter, there are no AE lights in the scene. I'm using the built-in lights. That's right. Stage Light has 3 built-in lights and its own built-in camera system, which you can use too. And you may say, well, AE already has lights. Why do we have lights in this filter? Well, this is because as I mentioned, the filter exists not only in the AE host, but also in hosts such as Avid Media Composer. And in a Media Composer, there is no camera and there are no lights. It's a 2D user environment. So we're bringing 3D in there by giving you the ability to create lights and use cameras to navigate around a scene as you would in a compositing tool. So that's a couple of instances of stage light. Let's have a look at a couple more. This gives you another idea of what you could do with the stage light. Now you can see how it's using these AE spotlights to create this very interesting looking scene. You can see how it interacts with a comp in 3D space. Another use of the stage light that we thought was quite interesting was to augment an existing scene, augment the lights in an existing scene. And so in this case, we've got this car approaching, its headlights on the right, and you can see on the left-hand side how I've used stage light, and if I just select the stage light layer there, how I've used stage light to add these headlights, give the headlights a little bit of volumetric lighting. And so as the car approaches, you can see the lights are animated, so they'll move across. I use the built-in motion tracker to do that. And you can see that it just gives the scene a little bit more interest. And let's go, and we'll just disable that. Here you can see the scene without the stage lights, and you can see the scene with the stage lights. It just looks a little bit cooler. And finally, for stage light, I've got another little comp here. And again, I've used this this idea of a car and its headlights at night shining, and there's this volume to the light. And this looks like a very natural-looking scene. Obviously, the colors are way saturated and really pushed and hyped up. I did that because I thought it would make it look just a little more interesting, because there's the scene without that, and there's the scene without the additional lights. So I've got a couple of lights in here. I've got the original live-action shot. And I've got the filter layer, which is giving us the volumetric lighting of these lights. That's the stage light holder. There it is right there. And on top of that, I added in a couple of other filters. And one of the filters that I used was BCC Film Process, and the other one was BCC Film Glow. So I'm just going to disable both of these and just show you quickly how that helped the scene also. Film Process I used to just push the colors and get that nice saturated look. And then the Film Glow, just to give everything this ethereal glow, because lights, as we know, are not 2D. Lights are 3D, and they give this like push all around them, this aura, if you will. So there's how we used the stage light and several different comps inside of After Effects to create some mood and drama and added interest to a stock scene. Right over onto the next comp. Here you can see I've used the stage light again to create some volumetric lighting, but I've also using the 3D extruded text inside of Boris Continuum Complete to create this extruded and highly modeled 3D text object. But I've also got these flares, these flashes on the lights that are in that scene. And those flares came from another one of the new filters inside of Continuum Complete, which is in fact a lens flare 3D. Now just back into the other comp, there's our lens flare 3D filter, and if I just disable that, you can see what it'll look like without those little stars on the spotlights in the scene. And it's just takes some time to clear a little bit of memory up for that event. And what else? There it is. It's kicking in. Give it a chance. It's just a laptop. So there you can see it. There's the spotlight without the lens flare, and no, we don't need to wait for that to finish. I'll just click on the next comp because we are satisfied with that. And in this 3D comp, I've used the BCC lens flare to augment the BCC stage light. So using two lighting filters together to create a nice 3D environment into which we've added the BCC 3D extruded text. So once this starts flushing its cache, I'll be able to continue on and show you some more stuff. It has a tendency to do this sometimes, especially on this little machine with, oh, he of little RAM. So here it is finishing up its little redraw, and I've just put the caps lock on to try to pull it out of that little memory loop, and there we go. Okay, we're back. Here it is. So continuing on with the lens flare 3D. Here I've got a comp, very natural looking scene. It's just a straight shot, and we've got this light in the background, and the light in the background is dipping in and around and behind these trees as the sun moves. It's a time-lapse shot. So as we come down, we can see that the sun is peeking out there with the trees. There it is. So what I wanted to do was to add a lens flare to this image clip, and I wanted the lens flare to behave just as the light does. So I wanted to hide behind the trees and come out in front of the trees, depending upon where the light is in the scene. And as you can see, I've successfully done that. But the only thing that I've had to animate is the position of the light. So I've gone in and I've, if I just press on U there we go. As you can see, the only thing I've done is I've animated the position of the light over time so that it matches the movement of the sun in the real live action shot. Then I applied the BCC lens, I used the obscuration map feature to tell the filter that there's RGB data that I want to use to obscure the light. And as you can see, when we come down and the sun dips behind one of these trees, which it does, and let's go and go to a frame where that actually happens. There it is. And I go to the next frame, and the sun starts to move out. You can see the lens flare becomes a visual element in the comp. So it is being obscured by the RGB data in the scene as we move through automatically and without me having to perform any magic keyframe changes. So I'm just going to move on down, and we're going to have a look at some of the other very cool things inside of the lens flare 3D filter. So for instance, I'm just going into the next comp, and as I drag through, see that once this catches up with me, there we go. So there it is, and I've got this very cool looking lens flare. And this lens flare is, if I zoom in a little bit, there we go. You can see it's got this cool looking star pattern in there. And there it is, and I just have it attached to this light in the scene because the light's rising, and I thought the flare should rise along with it. But just to give you an idea of the power of this particular filter effect, notice that I can drag it, and as I drag here, I'm getting real-time feedback, and this is because this particular filter is hardware rendering. That's right, it's GPU-based. So it's using the graphics processor to do all of the heavy lifting that's required to generate this kind of a visual element in the scene. And notice what else is going on here. As I drag around and cross over the center, the lens flare knows that it's got this pivot point, and it extends along the central axis between the light source and the pivot point here. We've got some other really cool features inside of the lens flare 3D. I showed you the obscuration map feature that we can use in RGB, but I can also use any image path, any mask path to obscure the light. We'll have a look at that in a couple of minutes. But as you can see, as I scroll down this parameter list, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And what's great about this is that we thought ahead, and we thought, okay, well, one thing that a user would probably want to do when they're working with this filter is enable or disable any of these elements quickly. So rather than having to twirl open a group and find out where the enabling or disabling button is on that particular lens flare element, everything is outside, giving me rapid access to all of the elements that are being used to generate that particular flare that we're looking at right now. And as you can see, I can just turn things on and off. The group becomes visible. I can twirl down the group, and I've got all these different additional parameters which I can use to go in and modify, customize this particular flare that I'm creating. On to the next comp. I showed you two ways to use the lens flare. One was by attaching it to a spotlight. Another one was, as you saw, just adding into that scene to create that spacey kind of cool look. Another one is using the luma values in a clip. So in this instance, I'm using the luma values in this comp to generate all these lens flares. And if I turn this filter off, you can see there's the original result. And you thought it really looked like this. Pretty good. Being able to use luma values to drive the lens flare. So one instance of the lens flare gives us all these different flares on the image that we're working with there. Moving on down, because I've got a lot to show you, and so is Dirk. Here's another really cool use of the new lens flare 3D filter inside of After Effects. What I've done is I've got this scene where I've got a bunch of different lights added. So if I can just pop that up, there we go. You can see I've got many lights just added into this particular scene to create this lighting grid or this lighting array. And as I drag through the scene, see the lights pulse on and off. Well, there are a couple of things going on here. What's happening is I've got one instance of the lens flare, which is using the AE lights to create this glow array. And then we've also got the built-in beat reactor in this filter, which is pulling up an audio file that I've got nested in the bottom of the comp. And the audio file histogram is being displayed on screen there. You can see it beating. There it is, pop, pop. And as it pops on, as we get an audio pop, what happens is I've instructed the filter to use this audio histogram to drive the intensity of the effect. So apply parameter A, global intensity. You can see there are many options in there to choose from in this particular filter with what we're going to do with the audio. And I'm using it to add to the value of this particular set. So let's click on play there. You can see it pulses to the beat. So built-in beat reactor. And you know, previously this was available just as a standalone option inside of After Effects. So we built it into many of these filters, and this carries over into Avid also. So you can create the same kind of look inside of Avid Media Composer with regard to the beat reactor and the audio-driven visual effects that we're looking at. And finally, with lens flares, here's another interesting use of the lens flare, I thought, which was to create this runaround. So I'm using the lens flare. If I just click on this solid, there it is there, and disable the lens flare, you can see there's my original text, onto which I've applied a BCC filter to generate this little bit of a glow. And then I'm applying the lens flare 3D. And I've told the lens flare 3D, oh, and by the way, I converted that text to splines so that I could easily instruct the filter to use that. And as you can see, there's the splines, B-O-R-I-S-F-X, spelling out this, this word. And what I've done is I've told the lens flare to run around the mask path. And in this instance, I'm using all the paths as separate objects. So I've got 7 flares being generated as a result. You can see there's one on each of these letters. But I could, in fact, use just one flare over the entire piece of the entire text element. So it treats it as one mask, or I can choose a single path. And in this instance, I've taken the mask for the letter I, and we've got the flare just running around the eye. So very powerful, very useful, very unique feature inside of the lens flare 3D. So I continue to move on. Another new feature inside of BCC 8 is the video scope. So everybody needs scopes. Everybody needs to know what their video is going to look like on a broadcast monitor. And if you produce a piece without scoping it and you send it off to your client, there's a chance that that might get rejected because it contains out-of-safe values. So along come the scopes. And hardware scopes are extremely expensive elements that sit on your desktop and monitor the output signal. And then there are software scopes. And BCC 8 includes a software scope. which is called the BCC video scope. Now the video scope has a ton of features. I don't have time to go through all of them today, but just suffice to say that you're getting real-time feedback there. You can see the scope is reacting as I drag through the comp, and the scopes can be placed anywhere on the screen, so you don't have to take your eyes off the screen while you're working with the image data. You can enable or disable any number of these scopes, so I can switch this to maybe just the RGB waveform, or maybe I want to see the YCBCR waveform. I've got options in the display panel, so I can choose color scheme white for those that don't want to see the teal color displayed in there. And a histogram. I'm just going to show you that we've got another great feature inside the broadcast safe group, and that is the log file. Now, if I click on it, what the log file does is it gives me a recorded log of any frames that it found while I was dragging through the comp that were out of safe zone. So you can see there are 3 frames there which it thought it recorded as being out of safe. And if I just drag this down, say the threshold, and give it some maybe some false data, you can see what happens. The red light comes on because it says, well, you set a luma upper threshold to 80, and this means that this falls outside of that region. And as I drag through a couple of frames, it's saying all these frames are going to be unsafe for broadcast. I click on the log file, there's the log showing that. So moving on to the next comp, which also has some the video scope filter applied. As you can see, there are some other things going on here. Here are all the monitors being shown at the same time. All the scopes are on. Just turn the scopes off there. See the results without it. There it is. In this comp, I've used a couple of different filters to grade this clip. There's the original. It was very blue, so I used the BCC 3-way color grade filter to create an inner and outer mask, and that way I'm doing primary and secondary color correction or color grading to this clip using the 3-way color grade filter. Then I used the film glow just to give it a little bit of extra zip. And then on top of that, I added the scopes. And the scopes are set up in such a way to let me know that I've got a luma upper threshold value of 90. And as I can see, I've got the highlight on scope feature enabled. So if I disable that, there's the scope. Turn it on, I can see easily, oh gosh, I've got these areas that are being highlighted in magenta, and these are clearly outside of the safe range. Now, if I go to the, I added another adjustment layer here, and I can use another instance of the 3-way color grade filter to go and bring these values down and make them safe again. So I can just bring them down below 90. You can see there's the, I just zoom up there and pan over. You can see there's the 90 IRE value, and it was above it, so the red light was on indicating out of safe, and the magenta showing us where it was out of safe, and then we just brought this back down and made it safe, and everybody's happy again. So vector scopes, very handy feature. A couple other things to show you quickly before I'm going to hand this off onto Dirk, so he can show you some really cool stuff inside of Avid Media Composer. But another new filter, or rather another improved filter, is the BCC Film Glow. So there's an AE glow. It's a great little glow effect, and for years this was a great go-to filter. BCC Glow was even better. This was improved on the AE glow. As you can see, there's a very slim set of parameters in there, and the BCC Glow has even more, including a built-in motion tracker and a beat reactor and compare mode, which we'll get to in a moment. But we brought it a stage further, and we created the BCC Film Glow. Now, why do we do that? Well, this is because the BCC Glow filter itself was really designed for video effects and was designed to be used on video source media. The BCC Film Glow is designed to be used on video source media also, but it's designed to give you the look of the extended dynamic range that film has. which of course we know is a lot greater than just a linear video clip. So this is giving you more log style values and giving you a nice organic looking glow to work with. We've used the glow here in these comps to create some different results. Here I'm using the built-in beat reactor to create, again, an audio-driven visual effect, and this time it's pushing the glow to make it brighter and dimmer on this ballerina shot. A more traditional shot that we might see a glow on is the sports shot, and here we've got the film glow applied to this clip. There's the original. There's the clip with the film glow, and you can see how cool that is. I've got the intensity set to just 100 on this. It goes way up. I mean, if I just twirl down, you can see it goes to 400. So I could really glow this out to white to create some very cool transitions if I needed to do that. And I've got independent control over X and Y width, which is giving me this really very nice kind of a diagonal glow result. But moving on quickly, because we've got a couple of other things to cover before I hand this over. And one is a problem that a lot of people have to deal with on a daily basis, which is flickering media. So let me just go back to the beginning here, and I'm just going to press Preview to RAM. And as this previews in, what you're going to see is that there's a luma flicker going on in this clip. And there it is. You can see this little blinking luma values in it there. I'm getting full playback now. I hope you are too. But you can see it's pretty bad. There's no way you could use this shot as is. I mean, something would have to be done to kind of flatten out or reduce the flickering in there. So what do? We bring in the flicker fixer. And flicker fixer, by just applying it, it goes in, and you can see how quickly it's able to work on this clip and reduce the flickering. I did nothing to this outside of applying it to the image. I didn't have to keyframe anything. I didn't have to modify any parameters. This is it, default. I just applied it and left it using the frame analysis mode. Of course, there are other options in here too, depending upon whether the flickering light is a natural phenomenon. Maybe it's caused by shutter in the camera, or maybe it's caused by light flickering in the scene, maybe a cloudy day or intermittent clouds. So frame analysis would be good for that. Or maybe you need to use temporal smoothing, which could be useful when you're dealing with flickering on a monitor or fluorescent lights. So, so there you go. Just before I hand off, there's a couple of little ways to use the new particle emitter 3D. So here it is eroding a piece of text. I'm creating this synthetic fire, and here it is doing a little title animation there, burn on, burn off. And on this particular one, we've got, again, some very cool looking particles on this title effect. It's doing a little wipe off there. And clicking on this last comp, we've got those 3D particles that I showed you at the beginning of this demonstration. Now, before I hand off, one thing I'd like to mention is that a lot of information and a lot of the stuff that I've shown you today, including some of these comps, are available on our website at borisfx.com. So if you go into borisfx.com, go into the Continuum page, and you'll see full descriptions of all the new filters, of all the new features. And in fact, there are even some of these comps and some of the ones that I'm showing you right now, which are available for free download on the site. And that's about what I've got to show you inside of After Effects. And I'm just going to now choose Stop Showing My Screen and pass this over on to Dirk de Jong, who is going to continue this and give us a demonstration of some of the BCC filters inside of Avid Media Composer.
So as Peter said, I'm going to spend some time in Avid looking at Boris Continuum Complete and the filter set that Peter was just showing you. BCC, it plugs into Adobe After Effects, Adobe Premiere, Avid Media Composer, Sony Vegas Pro, as well as Final Cut Pro. So in Media Composer, what I'd like to show, the idea of this webinar to some extent was to answer, some questions and some feedback that we got at NAB. And one of the things I heard from our people here who went to NAB was that A lot of people, BCC AVX users, AVX being the Avid plugin API, was, there's this feature called apply to title, and there's another feature in there called multi-filter, and people realize that they're kind of important and useful features, but they're not totally clear on exactly what they do. So in the course of showing you some effects, BCC effects in Avid, my idea is to sort of present hopefully a clear explanation of how to use those features and to get some good results. One thing I want to mention here, Peter was showing particle emitter 3D. In the current release of BCC 8 for Avid, particle emitter 3D is not part of the package. It was originally released in After Effects, and we were kind of adapting it so it would work better and work well and be more useful in the nonlinear editor context. So that is about to be added, and I'll be able to show that in Avid today. Should be available in a free update to BCC 8 for Avid within, I would say, a week or two at most. So I'm going to play down a little sequence just that I made here that shows particles. And just to give you an idea, let me adjust my size. Hopefully you get a decent frame rate here. But so this effect has 2 instances of particle emitter 3D, 2 instances of lens flare 3D. It's using motion tracking to drive the position of these. You can see the particles sort of seem to be bouncing off the floor. There's that kind of interaction feature for particles where it can bounce or stick or slide on a plane. So let me just play that down. And then this effect here, well, is basically, although it's not obvious that it is, it's 3D text, and using a shadow deformer and then also a light rays effect timed along with that shadow deformer. And these are the kind of things that to do them, you'll see that they are actually relevant to what I'm about to show, because you do need to use apply to title and multi-filter to be able to kind of pull these things off in Avid. And there we have sort of a synchronized camera move. This is the built-in camera in our 3D effects. And that's BCC extruded text, and then I use a film glow to sort of glow out the 3D text. And then again, this is it's more extruded text that can type on individual character animation. And then again, the BCC 8 particle emitter 3D in the context of Avid Media Composer. So I kind of made that. I don't plan to actually build those effects right now in the webinar, but just to kind of give you an idea of some of the features that are possible using apply to title and multi-filter in Media Composer. All right, so let me start out here. So here we have a sequence with some titles in it, and I just want to explain what the apply to title feature is. But before I do that, let's actually look at what an Avid title, and this also actually applies to an Avid imported graphic if it has alpha channel, what that actually is. And you see here, if I double click on it in the timeline, how it unfolds. If I kind of zoom in here, you see that there's 2 separate tracks inside of here. I can double click it to close it up. And if I use this arrow down and I step into this title nest effect, you see that I have this map. And if I move it down, and then this is the fill. And this empty space allows you to see what is the background track. So the situation is that alpha information or opacity information is actually done in the Avid timeline using map keys. So this title is an Avid map key, and at this level, it's already composited with the background. So, the issue becomes if I want to apply an effect, let's do like a light rays effect here. So I'm going to alt drag it. I'll nest it over the title. If I go into effects mode here, So you see, yeah, it's this light rays effect is aware of my title, but the problem is it's also aware of the background track, and maybe that's not what I want. I don't want it to be generating light rays based on that. So how do I do that? And that is where this apply to title feature comes in. So as I said, when I was nesting it just then, I alt dragged it, and those of you who use Media Composer are probably familiar with doing that. But what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to take this raise effect, and rather than holding down the modifier key, I'm just going to drag it and drop it right on here. You see by default that looks like, oh, that must be wrong or something like that, but it's actually not. Because here in effect mode, if I open up this title map group and I check this checkbox that says apply to title map, now we have, what is likely the effect that we really wanted here, which is that just the title is affected by these light rays. And the way this actually works is that if I close out of effect mode for a moment and double click on this, now we are doing the mat key. The BCC effect, the light rays effect, is doing that mat key. So if I step in here, you have that same situation. But there's actually no longer an avid title effect. So an important thing to using this feature is that it's destructive in the sense that you actually don't have, on this particular effect, you no longer have a link to text entry. So if you want to change what this text says, it's possible to do, but what you want to do is save this effect to a bin and then, overwrite it with the actual original title from the bin and then reapply that same way. So it's a good thing to do as sort of a last step once all the titles are finalized, if it's that kind of a situation. So so that is basically the apply to title feature. And one way of describing it is that apply to title allows you to access the alpha or opacity information from an avid title or an imported graphic for use in BCC effects. And you might say, okay, well, so how do you use it? Well, that's what I can show here. I'll show some good examples of that. Just undid my way back to just having the avid title. So find my bin here. So if I throw this one on, this is one that I made before. If I scrub through, so here's the light rays used, say, to bring a title on and off. And the way that's done, if I go into the effects, besides applying to title, and there's some animation. Change my windows a little bit here. So the intensity of the rays is animated, and to fade the title on and off, in general controls, effect layer opacity. That's how we do the fade there. So this effect layer opacity, it would apply. When it was an avid title, there was a simple way to scale it and position it and fade it. And when you're using apply to title and the BCC effect has replaced the avid title effect, there's still ways to do those things, which I'll show in a minute. This would be the way you would actually fade the title off and on. So there's light rays. Here's another just default title. I'll do, this is a kind of common effect. So this is Gaussian blur. I'm just doing it as a horizontal blur. And here's one where I use lens flare 3D to sort of bring the title on and off. It's the same lens flare effect Peter was showing you before. In this case, it's actually not used in such an obviously 3D way, but just basically to create a little flash. Here's a wave effect from the warp category. So it just kind of waves and fades in and then fades off. Wave is one I actually like to kind of combine in a stack with other filters, but we'll get to that a little bit later. And here's one where glow is applied to title and used to kind of as a transitional effect to bring the title on and off. So those are some examples of actually applying different kinds of effects to an Avid title to the title, and you know, a matte key generated from the Avid title tool. Now this is a logo with alpha, and this is the way it came in by default when I imported it. It's like full screen and all that. And again, if I go in here, you know, you get some of these controls. And again, if I step in, you know, it's same thing. So it says alpha matte and graphic fill. For some reason on this file, there's like 2 copies of the fill offset. It's just a strange thing, but it doesn't matter so much in the final effect. So let's take a look at using apply to title in that case. I think I'll use from the lights category edge light. So again, I'm not holding down a modifier key. I'm just dropping it on there, and that's what it looks like by default. So until you get things set up correctly, it's going to look a little bit strange. So apply the title, and just go to high quality here. So to make this kind of not look quite so flat. So something like that. And another feature which is used often in conjunction with apply to title is this geometrics group down here near the bottom. And it's already enabled. And what I can do with that is I can scale it. And I can even, this one looks like it was stretched on import, so you could kind of correct something like that. And you know, I can also position that, you know, either using the slider or the on-screen controls. You know, and again, if you want to fade it, in general controls, just use effect layer opacity and animate it, or you know, even just leaving it partially transparent. And like all effects, apply to title effects, you know, can easily be saved to a bin. So one thing I did, you know, earlier, if I look here. So this was an edge light effect I made earlier. I can just drop that on there and compare it to the one I just made. And another thing that some of you might already know, but some maybe aren't aware of, and it's kind of useful in particular with logos and stuff like this, is when I save it to a bin, you see I just click here, you see my little cursor turn into a hand. But if I use the Alt key as I'm doing that, you'll see what happens if I drag it in here. You see how it says BCC Edge Light with SRC? That SRC stands for source. So now if I go someplace else in this timeline and I say I just drag this into here, now it's not just the effect, it's actually the media too. So now you can basically use this you know, like a little generator. It's already got your logo and it's got all your effect properties as part of it. So I figured I'd remind people of that feature if they weren't aware of it or if they had forgotten it or something like that. So that is a case of applying it to an imported graphic. And I don't have one here, but if it was a QuickTime with alpha, if it was a moving matte key, it would be the same process. So this works, you know, for imported movies with alpha too that also come in as a matte key in Avid. Let's see what else. So this was just another version of that. You know, when I saved it, I saved a couple different versions of the logo, different treatments. So here is another title. This one again is from the Avid title tool. Just says obviously BCC particles. What I just showed was using the apply to title feature to be able to apply an effect to something, you know, with opacity, with alpha, whether it's a a logo or a title, without affecting the background. And that's probably the most common use of apply to title. There are other uses for apply to title, though, as well. And any time that I want to access the alpha information from this media, I would need to use apply to title. So here is another case. So I'm going to use the particle emitter 3D. Again, I'm just going to drag it and replace the title effect. And that's what it looks like by default. But what I want to do is this. I want to say apply to title. And actually what I have here, I didn't realize I'd already said it, is I have this, I'm using the filter layer as a layer map. And so that's why, you know, this particle effect is aware of the title and aware of its alpha channel, so it knows where to lay down particles and where not to. And again, you kind of saw this effect in there where you can do the kind of zoom thing, you can do interesting wipes, you can do all kinds of stuff using that feature. Particle emitter 3D, I recommend going on our website and looking. We have a couple of really good movies there, one by John Dickinson, excuse me, and one by Kevin McAuley that show particle emitter 3D in more detail. And I won't be sort of hitting on all the features of it, but I just want to show it in the context of this is another good use of apply to title. And here again, using particle emitter 3D in this case, if I apply this here, so you see what I have here. Oops, I'm going to effect mode here. So that particle effect is basically using, you know, the particle shape. So the title is, you know, each particle actually is that title. But you see that it's a big rectangle rather than, you know, keying over the background properly. And if I say apply to title, you know, then you get this. So it's basically, it's able, you know, and that would be true of logos, of titles, of, you know, if you're going to be able to need that alpha information in your effect, you know, whether it's as a particle or for some other reason, then you need to use apply to title. So that's just another example using particle emitter 3D. And here's another example. Peter showed, I believe, the obscuration layer feature of particle emitter 3D. And I'm going to lay this on there. And again, say apply to title map. And now if I preview this, you see how when the emitter goes behind the title, it's not doing anything right now. But since I'm applying to title, I should be able to set this to filter layer. Try that again. Yeah, and so the intensity and the color as well, if you have the options set up right, of the emitter, of the lens flare, you know, will be affected by that layer. And again, in the context of Avid, for it to be able to get that alpha information, you need to use the apply to title feature. So that's a quick look at apply to title. But you see down here in the same title mat group that there's these multi-filter start, mid, and end checkboxes. And so what is that all about? And that's what we'll take a look at now. So here, so here's another title. And you saw, you know, we did the wave, we did the blur and the glow and different things. Well, let's say that we want to do all three of those, you know, to one title. Well, let me throw the wave on there. Let's preview that. And that is already set to apply to title. So the first one down in this case, because it is being applied to something with alpha information that we need to use, is set to apply to title. Now let's say we wanted to apply the Gaussian blur after that. So in this case, we're going to hold down the Alt modifier key and drag it on there. And it looks wrong because when I saved these, it was still set to apply to title. We don't want it to apply to title. And let's preview that. Now the thing is there, it's affecting the background too, right? Which is actually not what we want. So what I'm going to do is in my wave, I say multi-filter start. Again, it'll look wrong until I finish until I kind of close the chain here. And then here in my Gaussian blur, I'm going to say multi-filter end. So now you have a wave and a blur, both affecting the title without affecting the background. So multi-filter is sometimes used in conjunction with apply to title. That's actually not the only situation you use it in, but it's one of the common ones because you're likely to want to be propagating this alpha opacity information through the effect chain. Now let's say that looked pretty nice, but actually we want to add another one. So I'm going to set this Gaussian blur to multi-filter mid. And there's do the glow, I guess. Again, I'm going to Alt drag that on, and in the glow, it's not set to apply to title, and multi-filter end. So now you have a glow, the blur, and the wave all simultaneously. Go in the wave and make it a little more obvious. Go to the first and last keyframes here. And the nice thing is once you've once you've set up keyframing, the way you can just save it to a bin that way is really, really useful. I find that when I work with BCC a lot in Avid that I'm not actually applying them by default from the effect palette too often. I'm more often doing it from a bin. And you can even actually, there's ways of even saving an effect stack in some contexts to a bin as well, which I'll show later on. So that's one use of apply to title. So again, we have the wave is set to apply to title because it's the first one in the stack. Multi-filter start because we know that we're going to apply others later in the chain. Multi-filter mid, there could potentially, hypothetically be, there's no limit to the amount of mid filters you could have there. And then the glow, to sort of close the chain, is marked with multi-filter end. So that's one example of multi-filter. Now, another example that I made here is, again, like let's just say this logo, and I'll do this edge light I'm going to drop on there, and I need to tell it apply to title map, and I'll go ahead and say multi-filter start. And then I think I did this glow. Alt drag that on there. And in there I'm going to say multi-filter mid. And then one more, I think I did a composite. Alt drag that on there. And here you can see multi-filter end. So now if I preview this, you can see how rather than just using opacity, it's actually giving you kind of a more interesting look because it's using a blend mode, which is in this case screen, and it's partially mixed to the overlay blend mode. And it also has an animated glow in there so that when the flame jumps, the kind of seems to glow up that way a little bit. So again, this would be another context where multi-filter would be useful. But it's actually not just for use with applied titles. This is a woman in front of a green screen. This is a shot, it looks like Rome or something, of a background. And then this is a big effect stack I made. Let me monitor it from up here. And if I go into effects mode on this, this gives you an idea. So there's a chroma key, a light wrap, a color correction, a multi-stripe wipe, film glow, colorized DVE. And I'll show that in a minute. Actually, why don't I just go ahead and, hopefully you can hear my system audio here because I used Beat Reactor on this one. Let's give it a try. So that's a pretty complex composite for the Avid Media Composer timeline, but using BCC is possible. And again, so if I go here and I put down this chroma key on here, and let's say light wrap is a common effect that's used after chroma key. It gives a sort of a nice incidental light effect on the edges of your key using the background track. And if I alt drag light wrap on there, go into effects mode, we're seeing no effect from light wrap at all. Now the reason that is because in here I need to say multi-filter start, which again will look wrong until you go into the effect that's downstream and say multi-filter end. So now if you look at the edges of this key, I'm going to just crank up this width, you can kind of see it there. With this effect, if you're not familiar with it, it's really nice what it actually does. If I view the wrap on black, so it's actually grabbing, if I turn the width way up and the softness way down, you can see that that's actually the background. And it grabs some of that and allows you to, and it maps it to the edge that way. Generally it looks good, it's sort of subtle values there. And so it makes the key kind of feel more natural. So that's one example, one kind of really common example where you want to use multi-filter, because otherwise the light wrap doesn't know about the alpha opacity information, you know, from the chroma key because it's already composited with the background. Basically, the way Avid works, if you're someone who works in After Effects, you know about pre-composing. And pre-composing can be a pain in the neck to have to do as a separate step, so often it's necessary. Well, the Avid timeline is always pre-composing. It's always pre-composing for you, and you need to sort of take specific steps if you don't want it to work that way, and that's what apply to title and multi-filter, as well as selecting alternate layers as inputs, which, well, I'll show next, what those things allow you to do. So again, if I take, you know, if we look at this stack, you see, you know, I did a chroma key, a light wrap, then I adjusted the color, the sort of contrast on her, and the hue a little bit, and then that wipe is a BCC multi-stripe wipe, and then there's film glow, which is responding to the audio, and then I did the colorize that wipes up and down, and then there's a DVE push that pushes back into Z-space to sort of break it all apart again. So again, sort of the power of the multi-effect situation there, preserving alpha and all that kind of stuff. So one more thing that I wanted to show is about how to access alternate layers using BCC in Avid Media Composer. So let me go here and take a look at this. Now, here's the thing. I told you about the fact that I mentioned that Media Composer is basically always pre-composing. That actually can be kind of a useful thing. So let's say, for example, here I have a dissolve between these two shots, and let's say that I want to make it kind of an additive dissolve, and maybe even more than that, you know, I want to basically have it glow. Well, one workflow for doing that people do. Now, the BCC glow that's currently in the product, it doesn't work as a single track transition. It really actually only accesses one video input at a time. But what I can do here, excuse me, is you see how I used an add edit and I marked a little area in this empty track up here. So this is just filler in here. I can actually apply this film glow to filler. And if I preview that now, let me go to, yeah, so there you see it. I have, you know, I animate the glow intensity up and back down again. And then I save that to a bin. You know, and you could just reuse this over and over, the situation. You're basically enhancing dissolves. And the reason it works that way is because that glow, you know, affects whatever is underneath it. It sort of, it's, again, using an After Effects metaphor, it's something like an adjustment layer that way. So there's the dissolve with the glow over it. And another one I think that I did here was, yeah, I'm just going to mark a little area. So again, my favorite horizontal blur, you know, could be obviously a vertical blur or a mix of both, but it's a nice little transition that way. And another thing that's possible is to create a stack here using a multi-filter stack, and you know, and have that do the same thing with that. And I actually did that before when I was setting up for this webinar. And you see this little subsequence called H blur glow. Actually, let me go to my other copy of my sequence, because this is kind of a useful little tip here. So this one, if I monitor up here, so this is the horizontal blur and the glow together. And what I can do, if I have this layer selected and I mark in and out, if I go up here and you see my hand turning into my cursor turning into a little hand there again, if I drag this subsequence down, so I just made a subsequence of only this little part, which is our effects, the BCC effects, the glow and the blur applied to filler. And now if I switch back here, you know, I can just actually drop that right on there, and I basically have it already. Actually, that's not, there's no dissolve at that point, which is why you're getting a jump. But you get the idea. So basically, even effects like that can be sort of saved and reused. Even a stack that is, you know, that is basically applied to nothing. It's applied to filler. But because the Media Composer timeline gives you that sort of adjustment layer behavior, it works. So what else do we have here? Okay, this one. This is another case. I wanted to talk about accessing alternate layers for use in effects. So here's the shot, and then let's see the time's getting a little late, so I may sort of kind of show this one a little more quickly. But basically, here's a case where I have a lens flare 3D and a light rays, excuse me, effect applied to this shot. And what I was able to do is, if I switch my monitor down here, I applied BCC Pixel Chooser's standalone effect there, and really easy to create a matte there. You know, the original shot, if I go up here or go over here, just based on the hue differences, I was able to create a matte like that. Pixel Chooser's a really powerful thing. And so here, this lens flare 3D, again, that obscuration layer, it's using first to below. So rather than the filter, the image itself, it's actually using this one, which is a pre-processed version of it. it could be a whole nother image, a whole nother video source file as well. But that's it's really useful to have multiple inputs. First, it's either filter layer, first below, second below. Some, depending on the kind of effect, may even have more. You can have up to 6 inputs. You'll notice that it's important if you need multiple inputs just to be aware that these green dot RT ones don't have multiple, or they have only 2 inputs instead of 3. This one, obviously, this category called 2 input effects is just that, 2 inputs. So that's something to keep in mind. You see here how basically so this lens flare is using this matte as an obscuration layer, and then this same matte is actually acting as the pixel chooser layer for this light rays effect. It's also going on there. So it creates the sort of illusion as if, again, this is the original shot, as if there's a light source back there in that window, or a light source that's really, you know, got some more 3D volume to it. Another example of accessing an alternate layer. If I apply BCC caustics here, I'm going to apply it to this empty layer here. Let me move my monitor up there. That's what caustics, switch to half so I can scrub it. That's what caustics is by default. You know, it's simulating water patterns and flowing kind of material and stuff like that. And if I go here, there's some interesting things you can do with it. The wave source, I can make that be the filtered layer. The color, I can make that be the layer itself too. And see that wave smoothing, wave height. Turn down the turn up the brightness on that. So you can get some sort of kind of interesting abstract, or in this case actually figurative effects that way. And you know, in this case, so background in general controls here is set to first below, but I could set it to, what I did here was, well, there's a couple things I could do. One is I could actually say it's opaque so that it's not keying through and showing the layer below at all. So here we have this this kind of look. And but another thing that I can do here is have the background layer be a second below. And in this case, I have the same shot but slightly offset in time. So there's examples like that where you want, you know, an alternate input because you want a different image, or maybe you want the same image pre-processed, or maybe you want the same image, you know, that's actually offset in time, and you can create, you know, some interesting effects that way. I thought that was a you know, interesting example of this is one that I already rendered before, where on the layer below I have a luma key just animating the threshold, which doesn't by itself look so great, but when it's the source of this effect, it's kind of interesting. It's like the water is coming in and filling in the space. So that's another example of using alternate layers. And again, I'd encourage people to save their effects to their bins, get these bins that they can import into multiple projects. You know, there's lots of examples of being able to save a subsequence full of effects that I find that I use a lot. If I switch back to this effect, see here I have this extruded text shatter thing saved, and what I did before was I dragged it over here and I called the subsequence rise and shatter title. So if I go here, you know, I can just reuse that there. Switch to half res here. You see how portable these effects can be. So hopefully that gives you some ideas about ways of using BCC in Avid Media Composer, and gives you an idea, particularly about compositing and stuff like that. In BCC 8, you have a lot of these new filters, film glow, a lot of the things that Peter already showed in the After Effects context. And as I mentioned, in an update in the very near future, we'll also have Particle Emitter 3D available as an Avid Media Composer plugin as well.